Hello and welcome everyone to the February edition of the You Already Own It webcast for our fantastic You Already Own It customers. I'm super excited today about what we have to talk about. We're going to be talking about organizational change management, something that's very near and dear to my heart. We have Pierre-Yves Delcote that will be joining us. As well. He is our change management lead here at Planet and works on my team. So we're super excited to have him. Pierre, if you could advance the slide, please. Thank you. Just a quick introduction. We're not going to take too much time before we get into the meat of things. You Already Own It team. The core You Already Own It team is myself, Bob Ballard. I'm the principal cloud strategist here at Planet, along with Aaron Ward, George Scott, Ken Nubler, Scott Dowling. We have Mary Tucker, who keeps us all in line and makes sure we're meeting all our commitments on sending all these announcements out, et cetera. And of course, it's all under the fantastic tutelage of Steve Winter, our vice president. Next slide, please. Thank you. Don't forget, as a benefit, just a reminder of as being a You Already Own It customer for those of you, all of you on this call and those that are listening on the recording later, that you have the ability to send an email to the You Already Own It at go-planet.com if you have questions, concerns around particularly nagging issues, want to have some info on some things. We're here to respond to you, get on the phone, and help alleviate your concerns, answer your questions, or set up a deeper conversation if that's what's required. So remember that. So real quick before I turn it over to Pierre-Yves, that I just want to sort of talk a little bit about how we got here at Planet. I tell this story often, and some of you that have been engaged with me before might recognize it, so apologies. But so when I came to Planet, I sort of got an interview from Scott Tucker, our CEO, and he asked me, if there's one thing so for those who don't know, I worked at Microsoft for 14 years prior to coming to Planet and worked with Planet quite a bit as one of my favorite go-to partners. And, he said, so what's the one thing that partners aren't getting, Bob? And what they're not focusing on? And I looked at him, after thinking about it for a little bit, and I kind of threw out a few other things at first, and then finally I said, it's the end user, right? So my favorite story is, so we had a large state in the Mid-Atlantic that while I was still at Microsoft and Planet was a partner, we did a number of Office 365 enablement services for them. The IT, we sort of finished the project. The IT, Planet, and Microsoft were all sitting around high-fiving, talking about how great things were. We were super thrilled with the project. During that week, I have a few friends that also work there, at that state. And so we noticed, because of people posting, that there were a bunch of posts out on Facebook about how horrible this new Office 365 thing was. Of course, we were all really perplexed. And it opened my eyes, and this is years ago, opened my eyes to the fact that just because we executed on the back end doesn't mean we executed in the eyes of the end users. And from that point on, understanding the end user acceptance, adoption, and managing that change became something that led me to bring Pierre on to the team, helped Planet guide in some of the creation of things like the Evolve 365 service for user adoption, and basically weaving this entire thing into the communication plan. Who is our change management lead for Planet to get the meat of the presentation started. Thanks, Pierre.
Thanks, Bob. This was a great introduction. So, yeah, my name is Pierre-Yves Delcote, and I'm working at Planet Technology. I joined the company a few months ago to lead organizational change management. I will say OCM now because it's easier for me to say. As you might hear, I'm French, so I might have a little French accent. So sorry for my French. I've been working on change management for more than a decade. I probably helped over 1 million end users to foster end user adoption, and especially around Microsoft technology, because before that I worked 11 years at Microsoft France, and I was always focused on how to help the end users, not only to deploy the technology, but how to help the end users. So the agenda for today is mainly to help you to understand why OCM is so key nowadays. Why is there a new paradigm here? And also we're going to talk about who we're targeting with OCM. And obviously, you probably want to know how we do OCM at Planet and what is our methodology, and and I will finish with the OCM benefits that we've seen with our customers. So why OCM? So as you might have seen for last I will say 15 years, there have been so many challenges in the digital environment of your consumers, of people. These pictures have been taken on the Vatican during the election of the Pope, and you can see that in a few years, in less than a decade, the change was tremendous in terms of digital experience. So change is fast in the consumer area, but it's also fast. And if you have worked on Office 365 for a long time, which is my case, you've seen so many services, new services, and last year there was 1,500 new features in Office 365. So you can imagine that the organization are really overwhelmed with all those change, and it won't stop. It won't ever stop because it's a cloud. The cloud is like that. So there's a new paradigm with the cloud technology that the change is not an option. Change is always there, and you need to have a strategy about how to handle this change and take advantage of this change. Obviously, you won't use all those features, but you need to understand where it's the most useful and when it's the most useful for your organization. We can observe that most of the organizations are deploying the technology in a one-size-fits-all strategy. And this approach can create or reinforce inequity because basically change is targeted to people, human, and human are different. People are experiencing the technology in different ways. Some are really mature, some are not mature, some are tech savvy, other are hate technology. So it's really key when you're deploying the technology, especially nowadays that there's so many technologies that are coming almost every 3 months, to adapt your strategy depending on the maturity of your employees or your colleagues, your peers, and because you want to avoid to create inequity or reinforce this inequity within the enterprise, especially with different generation working together. I think that now there's 4 different generations working together in the workforce. So it's pretty a big challenge when you deploy a technology that people were born with, and people just discover that kind of technology nowadays. And for example, I will just take the example of Teams, which is probably the most disruptive tool from Office 365, which requires to understand how people can leverage it depending on their maturity. And often people require change, they request for change, they say they want change, but when it's time to change, then the people and the employees are faced to a disruptive event. The change will be disruptive because they're focused on their day-to-day work, and now it's time to change. So it creates some stress, and people are not willing to change. They probably said they want to change, but when it comes, when the day comes to change, then they're not there anymore. They don't want to change, and we know that this is a bell curve of the adoption, and we know that only 15% of the workforce is ready to change. So it's really key to try to target those people we call the early adopters. The innovators are the people who are already using the technology without you knowing it, and they're probably using shadow IT because they're experimenting out of scope of your organization. But the early adopters will be your best friends to achieve change management, because the rest of the curve of the bell curves, the early majority, late majority, and laggards. So the laggards are the people who are printing their email, for example. Those people are really cynical. They're practical. They just want to know what the benefit for them to change, because change is disruption, and by default they don't want to change. And finally, people don't have time to change. They're too busy. In every organization I work with, people are over busy, and so the challenge here, even if you bring a ton of value, and I can say that Office 365 brings a lot of value, maybe too much value, but you need to find out what's the right value for you. But the main problem is how you grab the attention of the people to be sure that they can see that there's a value, that then they can be disrupted and they can be convinced that there's a return on investment, so they can focus on what's new to better understand, take some time, take some effort to understand what's new, because there's a benefit for them. So you need to grab their attention. That's one of the challenge when we do change management program. And change, as I said, is vital. Especially now that the cloud is here and that the new features are coming every week. Actually, at Microsoft, every week there's a new feature or several. I remind that there was 1,500 new features last year. So it's really amazing what the end user can be exposed to. So the change is there. It's unstoppable. So it has to be not. It's change now. It's a state of mind. So it's not an option. You don't change every 6 years. It's not a quantum leap every 6 years. Now it's perpetual. So when we look at who's concerned by the change, I define three different categories: the end user, the IT department, and the organization. When I talk about the organization, I mostly talk about the managers. So what are their challenge when they're facing the change? So most of the people are not tech savvy, so they might be scared about this new change that you're going to deploy. They're too busy, as I just said. They have other things to do, and they think that they're quite comfortable doing what they're doing today, and they might not understand why they need to change. And they also, especially with Microsoft Office 365, which is really rich, and sometimes there's some overlap between the different services. So it might be too complex for the end users. Maybe it creates confusion with all those overlap. What should I use to do what when? And really, the end users are. It's really, and I'll come back on that. But it's really simple what they're asking for. They want to know what's the benefit for them, what's really changing, what is the scope of the change, and why are they changing? Because they're already working, they're already busy. So why do they need to change? And finally, they need to understand how the organization is going to help them. For the IT, the main challenges are that the IT department is deploying a cloud technology as Office 365, has already too much on their plate, focusing on the deploying, securing, define the right governance around technology. And at the same time, they're not proficient with this technology. So they have to ramp up themselves on understanding the technology and also understanding how to use the technology. and they're not proficient in terms of communication. And often we ask the IT department to communicate around this change, and they don't have communication skills. They're IT people, and it's really understandable that they've not been trained to communicate to the end users. And they're not same thing for the training. They don't have skills to train people. So there's a lot of burden on the IT side. And also they don't want, because it's so rich, Office 365, for example, is so rich, the cloud is so rich, that they don't want to open a can of worms discussing of such and such features, because if they're going to start to discuss that features with the end user, maybe they won't have time to understand everything that they need to understand before deploying it. And finally, they're concerned to find the right balance between create the right governance, the right security environment without having a bad impact on the velocity and the autonomy. So the tension between end users and the business on one side and the IT, because IT is responsible to offer a really cohesive and secure environment. And at the same time, the end user want more autonomy, and they won't have the right to when they want. So it's difficult to find the right balance when you're deploying those technologies. From an organization standpoint, the leader of an organization, they don't want their business to be disrupted by the deployment of a technology, for sure. They want return on investment. If they're buying a new technology, it's because they want a return on investment. So they're really concerned also about how the management layers are going to react to the change that is induced by the technology, especially around collaboration, because when you introduce tools like Teams, it's really disruptive, and it can lead to change of behaviors, not just change of how to use the technology or how to collaborate, but change how you maybe how you manage. Because it's more transparent, so maybe you have to rethink how you work. So there's some challenge for everybody in the company when you're deploying the change. And we've seen also that the customers we're working with, they're in different maturity level in terms of change management. I segmented in 4 maturity level, what I call the discover maturity level, but basically it's the customers who don't really do anything about change management. They just deploy the technology and let the end user consume the technology and find their way by themselves. And that's what we do at home. When you have a new app on our phone or on a computer, we ramp up by ourselves, and it's an option. It's probably not the right option, but if you don't have the time or the focus or the budget, that's an option. So here the goal is to deploy the technology for that maturity level. It's mainly really small organizations that are in this maturity level. The second level, which is learn, I call learn. So the goal here is to educate the end users how to use the technology. So the focus is, okay, we're going to deploy a new technology, let's say Teams. Here the focus is how to use Teams. So IT going to provide some content, HR going to provide maybe some training session, and there will be some communication, and there will be a help desk to help the end user. And it will be always focused on how to use the technology. I will say that most of the organization, especially in the government, are in the learned maturity level. And then there's a change maturity level. Then the goal is more to align the IT and the end user in leveraging the technology for the business process. So it's not just how to use the technology, it's how to use the technology for my day-to-day work, for my business process. How can he help me? How can he help me? And when I say me, there's different role in the enterprise. We have different business process, different needs, and so it will help them differently. So that's why you need to have an executive sponsor that will lead the change, and you need to identify the use cases. So you need to understand how your end user are working, what their blocker, what their needs, and what is their job, because understanding the job will help you to define and help them to find the right use case that will be supported by the new technology. And also, it's a good way to reconcile the IT with the business unit if it's a problem. It's not always the case, but it's a good way to make them work together and find the right solution, because the IT has the knowledge of what the technology can do and the potential and the risk and the limits. And the end user, the business user, they know their business better than anybody else. So if they work together, they'll find the right solution. And then the last maturity level is a transform. So transformation maturity level of change management. So basically here, the goal is to transform how people are working. So it's not just a matter of how to use the technology. It's not just a matter of how to use the technology for my business process. It's a matter of how do I change my behavior, so to be better aligned with the goals of the organization. So, for example, when I talk about transparency, working in more transparent environment, that has obviously impact on the way you manage, on the way people are working together, collaborating together. There's a change of behavior that is needed here, and so you have to work on it. So probably here you need a C-suite to lead the change. The manager are the first blockers in the digital transformation, so you have to coach this manager because they need to understand what the benefits are for them, because there will be an impact on the change of behavior and they will be the first to be concerned. So, and also probably you need to sustain the change, because the change is, as I said earlier, the change is not an option, it's perpetual now. So you need, and I strongly recommend that even for other maturity level, to have a champions program to sustain the change, because you need people to help their peers to better understand what the goal of the change is and how they can change and how they can sustain the change along the life of the company or their organization. So, how OCM? How do we do OCM at Planet Technologies? So first, before saying how and describing it, I think that if there are some customers here in the call that are using Evolve 365, they're already doing change management, maybe without knowing it. But for example, Evolve 365 for us is really the engine of the change management. We're relying heavily on Evolve 365 to run the strategy of the change management. And we have in our framework of helping our customer in designing a change management program, we have these 5 questions always in our mind. And it's really basic, but I think it's a good framework to remember. The employees just have 5 basic questions they want their organization to answer. The first thing is, am I concerned by the change? I might be part of an agency within a state, and I've heard that another agency is going to be deployed with a new technology. I need to know if I'm concerned or not. It's same thing when you have a central IT and different business units who are deployed. Business unit want to know if they're going to be part of this change. So the end user wants to know if they're concerned by the change. So the first question you need to address in your plan. The second question is, what is the scope of the change? And what's come with it is, when is it? Okay, you're going to deploy something, you're going to deploy teams. So I understand what is the scope, it's teams, but when are you doing that? Because if you, for example, if you're telling your users that next week you're going to have a new environment, this is going to be a disaster. So you need to plan that and plan ahead and communicate well. Third, it's really important. I think that even before that, it's really important to make people understand why is there a need for a change. Because basically, people, as I said earlier, they don't want to change. Most of the people don't want to change. You're telling, for example, you're telling them, hey, we're going to deploy teams to better collaborate. If you say that, people are going to think that I'm already collaborating. I'm already using Outlook, and I'm already storing my document in SharePoint. Maybe I'm already collaborate. Is there a need for a change? Do you really think I don't collaborate well? So they need a purpose. They need a vision. So you need to answer this question: why is there a need for a change? It's not just to modernize your environment. There should be a need aligned with the strategy of your organization. And finally, the last two questions, which are also really important for the end user, especially when you come close to the change. The first one is, okay, I understand the purpose of the change. You're deploying team because we need to be, for example, the vision could be, we need to be more transparent and be faster when we want to better serve our customer in such matter. So that's why we're deploying teams, because it's faster to collaborate. But now I understand the global purpose, but as an individual, what is the benefit for me? So tell me what's the benefit. Will it save me time? Will it bring more quality? What are the benefits? Give me some good examples. So because if I understand the benefits, then I will buy in the change. And finally, when they understood the why, the scope, and the benefits, they might be really excited at first. Then you say, tomorrow you're going to migrate. You're not going to have a new environment. Then I can guarantee that for most of the people, so you remember the bell curve, so for 85% of the people, there will be stress. There will be stress because now they want to know how are you going to help them to face the change, because it's disruptive. It's not natural to change. The people are not willing by default to change, except for the innovators and early adopters. So we need to have this. We have this framework in mind when we do the change management. So change management is twofold for us. The first part is on the left side of this slide, and it is mainly to build a strategy, build the change, and the right side is to run the change. So the different steps we're using here in our methodology is first to define your future vision and your goals, understand the scope of the change you want to put in place. Then, so we do that with the exec sponsor in general, and then we need to understand what are your needs and what are the opportunities, and also what are the blockers. So then we're going to meet with the end users, managers, different people within the organization to understand what can be difficult in terms of change management, where are the blockers, but also where are the opportunities. What use case can be really transformative and helpful and can excite people. And then we define the plan. So we build a plan. I'll go in more detail in a few slides. We build the plan because without a plan, you cannot achieve any transformation. And then we drive the change and to target the adoption. And then there's a cycle, and the cycle of adoption or end user adoption is based on communicating and training, and especially on champions, build a champions community and feed this champions community with information, with knowledge, so they can help their peers. And also we need to measure. We need to measure if it's successful. So when you build your plan, you define your KPI, and then when you run the the plan. You measure if there is a success. So it can be, for example, how people are consuming Office 365 services in usage dashboard. It can be also, especially with Evolve, how people are consuming the training that we're going to provide in Evolve, and also see if the people who are consuming the training are also the people who are consuming the technology. So we can know that there's an impact in terms of how Evolve is used, and maybe the communication campaign that Evolve is sending. We can see if there's an impact on the consumption of the services. So we run that, and that's why Evolve is a service which is a subscription based for a year, and you can renew every year. I will recommend to everybody to renew, because technology is changing all the time with new services, and that's why it's really key to have these two phases. And sometimes when you introduce a new service, you rerun this methodology for the new service. Like, you have a new service now, it's Teams, so you have to redefine your vision, and assess your needs, and so on, and then run the program for end user adoption on Teams adoption. So we designed 4 different offerings that we can adapt for every customers, but we have 4 different offerings to help our customer to go faster depending on their maturity level. So the discover offering, a learn offering, a change offering, and transform offering. And depending on the maturity level, we'll be light, or we'll go deep with you. So basically, the discover is a 2-day workshop where we try to explain how OCM is working, what are the options, try to start discuss of your project, and see different options that will be good in your context. The learn is we start to assess your needs to understand what are the real needs in terms of transformation, and then we do steps in the methodology. So spend time to define with you the vision, because obviously if you want to change, then you want to put some purpose in the change, and you want a best plan with all the options to articulate in the change management. Probably want to define some KPI, or you need to define who are the roles and responsibilities, especially if you have a central IT and you do several plans to deploy technology. And in this offering, we start a cycle with you, especially with the pilot. So pilot, it's another thing which is key. A pilot is key in a change management program, just as it is key in technical deployment. It might not be the same approach, but the idea is in a pilot is to validate the change management plan, to be sure that the communication you send, the training you provide, whatever you do in terms of change management is good enough, and then you can adjust it. And the final offering is transform. So then there's a need to more than doing the building the vision, assess the needs, maybe more deeply than in change. We need to assist the management. So that's a big difference, and also help to build champions to sustain the change during the life of the organization, because change now is perpetual. So it's really important to have a champion community in a way, the best way that fits to you, and define how this community is working, how you recruit people, what are the profiles that will be good for this community, and how do you feed this community in terms of knowledge for them to share their knowledge with their peers. So here is the detail. I'm not going to dig into all the details of this methodology, but for this offering, transforming, But as I said, we start with a vision. So we do a vision workshop with usually with executive or executive sponsor or C-suite people, the decision maker. And because we need to understand what is their vision, what is the company vision, the organization vision, and how we can build a vision based on that is connected to the technology deployment. And we build a vision statement. So a vision statement it's really a powerful tool, because every time that somebody is going to ask, well, why are we changing? Then you can refer to this vision statement. We worked on this. That's a global purpose. The vision statement is a global purpose. Remember, this is a global purpose. Maybe you think that what you're doing right now is not really important or interesting, but it's connected to a global purpose. That's why we build a vision statement. Then we do the assessment. So we do the assessment with the IT, because we need, obviously, the IT department knows better than anyone what's in-house in terms of technology and what the people are using, and maybe also the help desk knows what are the most the complaints that the end user have, and what are the issues they have, or maybe sometimes they know what they want. And then we'll also visit with the end user, and we have some interviews with people who are representing the population within the organization, to understand what are their needs, what are their blockers, and also understand, as I said earlier, what is their job, because sometimes they're not capable of expressing what really their needs are. I remember Henry Ford saying, if I asked people what they wanted when we had horses, they will say better horses. So people might not have the solution. So it's important to understand where their needs are and what their job is, to find if what you're providing in terms of technology, the technology you're going to deploy, how this technology can help them and can change their life. And then when we have all this information, so it's a diagnosis, we try to prioritize the use case, or where are the change priorities. Because when you're deploying technology, I can guarantee you that there's tons of features you can use, tons of them. But if you just say Teams is the best example. There's so many ways to use Teams, so many products behind the scene in Teams that it's going to be overwhelming for people to receive Teams. Because it's confusing. There's a lot of things, and it's disruptive. So what we do to define the priorities is what we do in general. It's what we call a focus group. So a focus group is we bring together different people representing what we call the personas within the enterprise, so the different profile. So an executive assistant, a VIP, a manager, a frontline worker, an information worker, etc. And we demonstrate the technology and usage to make them react and let them say what is really transformative for them, what's really super efficient in their life. And then we have a matrix where we know what is really key, depending on what job they have, what is really key for them. So that's a priority. And internally at Planet Technology, we know what is, when you say this feature is really is going to be really helpful. We know if this feature it's a no-brainer, or if it's probably difficult to learn. So then we know what we need to communicate on. It's a no-brainer. So it's the features that are really useful for the majority of people. So that's where we communicate. And the features that are really useful but are complicated to implement or to learn, that's why we put in the training. So then we're able to build a strategy planning. And the strategy planning is to build the communication planning. So when to communicate what to who, in which channels, depending on your culture. We do the same thing for the training. And we try also to define a role and responsibility metrics, especially in big organizations. So who's going to do what in terms of change management? What are the roles and responsibility? I help also to define the governance, because maybe there's two ways to approach the governance. There's a global governance that implies also the where the IT team is involved, because there's a change that's coming. Microsoft told you that a new feature is coming. They're going to change, for example, they're going to change the user interface of Outlook or whatever. There's a new feature. So you have a little bit of buffer, but you probably want to have a governance around that to say, oh, okay, are we going to handle that in terms of deployment, technology deployment, or also in terms of communicating to the end users? So we help with the governance for that, and also in terms of what I call user governance, which are what are the best practices. And what are the best practices is not only about how to use the technology, but how to behave with the technology. For example, I'll give you a simple example. To me, a best practice is to share your calendar with everyone within the organization. It might not be a good fit in your culture, but if your purpose is to be more transparent and be more have a better velocity in terms of collaboration, then it's probably a new way to behave, and it's to be more transparent. So open your calendar to everyone. So we work on that with you, and also we build a champions program to define what's the profile of a champion, what is the job desk of a champion, how much time do we need for them to work on the champion program, what are the gives and gets. And also we can work on how we're going to coach the management, because as I said earlier, the first blocker in the transformation is the management layer. So then I talked about already the pilot. So the pilot is really key for us, because it helped to see if we sized and if our strategy is good enough, and it's never good enough. It's never, we can have the best plan in the world, it will always fail somewhere. So we have to, the pilot is there to help us to adapt the strategy, and hopefully we don't have it too much, but we adjust it to the context of your environment. And then we run, especially with Evolve, when you purchase Evolve, we run the communication, the training, and we can provide also assistance, management assistance. We can coach managers to understand what are the benefits for them and what are the behaviors, new behaviors they can be advocate for. And also we help to measure the adoption. And as I told earlier, there's a champion program that we help to design, and the Evolve team, they have an add-on on helping your champions to be more knowledgeable about the technology. So what do we see in terms of benefits when we do change management program? So basically, really, it's a matter of create more clarity and alignment between business units and between the business and the IT department, changing the paradigm where when you deploy technology, there's disruption. So we want to empower the end user. We don't want people to be stressed. We try to reduce the stress at the maximum and get people excited, see the value, the benefits, so they will desire, and they won't be scared by the change. And we also try to understand your maturity in terms of end users, what end user do need more help than others, what kind of help do they need, and to avoid the one-size-fits-all deployment where some people will be autonomous in terms of change and other will be stressed. So it's really key to understand what maturity level is in your organization. And finally, it's to build momentum about the change. So I list here a few benefits for every every category, the end users, the IT, and the organization. I'm not going to dig into that. You'll have the session recorded, but I will pick some really huge benefits we see. The first one is I don't like to say increase productivity. I think from an end user perspective, it doesn't mean anything. And increasing the productivity, it's basically saving time. So the main thing, the what we can't deal with is time. So if we can save time to people, that will change their life for sure. So we try to focus on that when we do change management, how we can save time to the end users. For the IT, I think the main benefit is really to bring to be able to bring more value to the end users, increase the satisfaction by partnering with the business and the end user, so they're more clarity of what the end user need and what are the IT constraint, and get the best of both constraints. And finally, in terms of organization, the main goal, I think, is really to increase the alignment, especially between business units, if it's possible, or between agencies, or between different departments, to build increase the alignment, because so often people are reinventing the wheel within the same organization. So if we can help to augment the collaboration, the way people are collaborate, and sustain this change by helping the organization to put in place, especially nowadays, it's really key to rethink how we collaborate. And I think that the organization, that's where they get the most value of how to better collaborate between different probably silos today. So, Bob, that's
okay. Great.
About it.
Yep. So thank you so much, Pierre. I mean, I think this was a great overview, and obviously it's a lot to take in, and a lot of things that, as you mentioned, sort of where most of the customers that we deal with are, on the second level of maturity around these things. There's a lot of things that I think many organizations, mildly think about, but have not really spent time and effort in thinking about. So it's sort of driving a way of thinking that not everyone is used to, and that's why it's important. So at the end of the day, some level of change management needs to be put in place to have any level of success in maintaining a deployment, or even just continuing to exist in an Office 365 environment. Now, the question for our customers are, so A, how far on that maturity level do you want to get? And then B, what pieces and parts are you willing to do, and what pieces and parts do you need, help for in achieving that goal? And that's how we find the right sort of engagement level to work with you, right? So whether, in any new project that goes out in Planet, that we account for organizational change management. Sometimes the customer says, that's all me, and that's fine. But I think as you see where if you're trying to get more mature in this, in this evolution around change management, then, many organizations probably need a little help getting there. So, so as we go through, thanks, Pierre. So, most of our customers are sitting in the learn phase. If you're trying to get to change and, ultimately transform, you're probably going to need some help in doing so to sort of change the culture with the organization. So with that, feel free to reach out to your Planet team if you want to know more information about this, to have a follow-up with Pierre-Yves or anybody on the Cloud Strategist team. I can tell you that across the board, it's near and dear to the heart of all the Cloud Strategists. So whether you're working with myself or Scott Dowling or Aaron Ward or George Scott, we are well versed in this conversation and can certainly engage Pierre-Yves to have further conversations with you, as well as other members of the Planet team that engage in organizational change management. So are there any questions out there? So I will go ahead and just drop on go one more slide over. Why don't you just pop on one more slide over? So if you have some questions, feel free to type them in the box. or chime in. While I sort of go as I do on every month session, I jokingly say, this edition of the You Already Own It webcast was brought to you by Azure Advantage, and as well as Office 365 Advantage. And what is it? It's a combination of capabilities that we deliver to our customers, sort of after we leave, right? And they're geared around really two categories. There's do I need help actually executing some of the day-to-day or more challenging tasks within the environment? Maybe I'm a smaller organization, or maybe I had turnover, or maybe I need to worry about having somebody there for when folks are on vacation and I don't have a large enough staff to take that on. To advising, which I think is even one of our most popular offerings, which is, can I timeshare a cloud architect to help me envision these things from a technology standpoint moving forward? Whether that's on, Azure or Office 365 or both, we have solutions to provide you for that. As well as closing the loop, we have a ton of great offerings around organizational change management as well. So feel free to reach out to us if you have further questions. Any last calls for questions around OCM? Well, thanks everyone for joining. I think this was a great call. We'll see you next month.